we're going to look at the housing policy, which was announced by the coalition yesterday, supported by Labor within hours. Let's go live to Brendan Coates. He's from the Grattan Institute. Brendan, what do you make of this policy? Does it have merit?
So falling home ownership is a big problem for younger Australians. The policy tries to get at that by getting over the deposit hurdle, but the challenge is really twofold. One, it's only 10,000 people a year. So even after a decade, even if everyone who got access to this scheme wouldn't have otherwise bought a home, the home ownership rate might be 1% higher than otherwise. And secondly, if the scheme was expanded, it would probably end up being counterproductive because it would, if it was much larger, end up pushing up prices in the long run.
Yeah, and that is certainly the risk. There's a lot of information, I might say, that we don't have, but politically, Labor has been arguing in this space that they are the party for first home buyers, but the negative gearing strategy and winding back those tax breaks, it doesn't actually pull... Well, they're trying to argue it doesn't bring house prices down, and if it does, I mean, we've seen a 20% drop in Sydney or thereabouts. It still hasn't been a big enough drop for these first home buyers to actually get into the market. So what is the solution?
Well, I think on Labor's policy, it won't affect house prices much. That's certainly what our research shows, maybe a 1 to 2 percentage point change. But it will probably lead to a boost in home ownership because when you're showing up at the auction, you'll no longer be competing with an investor who's looking to negatively gear the property, and that will involve fewer investment properties being purchased and therefore more first home buyers purchasing in the market. But the long-term challenge really that neither side is addressing properly is the fact that if you want more homes and you want them to be cheaper, then we need to build more. And that means addressing the problems with land use planning rules in our major cities, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne. And that's essentially made it hard to build that density in inner and middle ring suburbs. And that's what's really keeping prices high. And unless we fix that, we're unlikely to see a big improvement in affordability in the long run.
Brendan, is it also about trying to boost incentives for people to settle outside of the cities where we've seen those booming house prices? Surely that would be a measure as well that would, work in a number of ways as well, taking a bit of heat off the bulging infrastructure as well.
I think that the question you've got to ask is, well, why are house prices so high in Sydney and Melbourne? And it's because where all the jobs are. So you could get people to move out of the city. The challenge would be for them to be able to find employment and get work and then pay down that house anyway. So, the ratio of house prices to incomes in some of these regional areas, say like Armidale, isn't actually that much lower than parts of Sydney, because even though the house prices are a lot lower, your income's a lot lower as well. And so I think we've been trying for 100 years to sort of decentralise Australia to get people out of the major cities, and it hasn't really worked so far, so I wouldn't probably expect it to start working today.
100 years, that's quite grim. Brendan, thanks so much. Appreciate it. We'll speak to you soon.